So thank you all for being here. It's very pleasant to be in Marseille. I should thank Romain, who invited me. And I should thank you all for attending the presentation and all the interesting discussions I had this morning. So the paper I'm going to present is a paper that is a joint work with Annalie Casanueva-Artis, who's a junior professor at the IFO Institute in Munich. She specializes in two things, social movements and social media. She's extremely efficient at playing with APIs, for instance. And Paul Stephan is a co-author who's just starting his PhD in Zurich. He was a research assistant with Annalie, and when we started working on the project, he made good comments. We asked him, or Annalie asked him to perform a couple of tasks, and he did them so well that we invited him to join, and actually he's a very efficient co-author. In a few years from now, I suspect that we will read his publications in top journals. He's extremely good. And so is Annalie. Both of them are extremely good. In a sense, I'm the junior partner in this group. Okay, oops. So, and as Morgan said, thank you, Morgan, the paper is about riots, protests, and the general question that we are going to look at is the extent to which those things are disseminated along social media. And we are going to focus on a specific case that I will introduce and that some of you may remember if you follow the news. So, now I think that it's no longer a question, it's a stylized fact. It's been shown in several setups, several countries, that social media facilitate protest. It's been shown in autocratic countries. So in Africa, you see that there are more the spread of protest followed the increase in the spread of mobile phones. That's the paper by Malacorda and Tesei. The same happened in Russia. You could track protests in Russia in 2011 following the social media in Russia, the specific Russian social media, and also in China. So that's for autocratic countries. And all those papers tell us the same story. Social media have an impact on the propensity to host a protest or to participate in a protest. And the same applies to democratic countries. There's also evidence that, for instance, the Black Lives Matter movement was disseminated along social media, and Annalie and co-authors shows that that also applies to the BLM movement, but also to the 15 May, so 15th of May protest in Spain. So, okay. We could stop here. It's now become some kind of scientific consensus in the literature. Social media facilitate protest. But what people do not realize is that such univocal evidence is a paradox. We should be surprised by how clear the evidence is. Why is that? Because social media fundamentally are empty pipes. You can convey whatever kind of information on the social media. So admittedly, it's easy to convey information and about how to organize a protest. So social media allow bottom-up organization to organize protests from the bottom up. So grassroots organizations can mobilize, mediatize their costs thanks to social media, because it's very cheap, it's accessible, it's easy. So that's why we can reasonably assume that social media contribute to disseminating protest. But at the same time, social media can be used by the government as well to counter protest. The government can use social media for propaganda. They can use social media to monitor people who participate in protests. So if you participate, if you share information about a protest on the social media, the government can knows that you are supporting the protest. And finally, social media can also be used to scare people and deter people from participating in protests by sharing scary information. You're going to be hit by the police, you're going to be arrested. And so it becomes a question to determine why. There's an overwhelming evidence that the dominant factor is that social media help people who want to protest as opposed to government. And this is typically the question that we are going to look at in this paper, and the answer. So it's a work in progress. So the answer won't be final, but we will provide evidence. And the evidence that we put in the paper is that it all has to do with content. It's what you share on the social media that matters. And for the time being, the content of that was shared around protests when protests were taking place has not been studied in great detail. Yes?
But I mean, you're studying all like protests that actually turned out to be protests. But isn't there maybe like other findings that because they're non-events? Like if the government is good in preventing protests, then there's not going to be a protest. Like thinking about China, where they control social media quite a lot. I mean, they're just managing not to have protests.
So in the 3 papers that are devoted to non-democratic countries, the identification typically takes uses the fact that the spread of the internet or social media or mobile phone was staggered over time. And so you observe that there are places where there were no protests, at the same time places where there were protests, and the places where a protest was observed typically was better covered or connected. And the paper by Qing and co-authors, I take your question, on China tracks networks online and observes that the protests follow those networks. So I see your point. We don't observe the protests or riots that did not take place, but we can compare places where there were social media or an easier access to social media or to the internet with other places, and that's typically how the literature identified the contribution of social media and the internet to protest. Yes?
Related to that, so you look at a net effect, so the interaction of the two, but would you be able to say anything of what would be the upper bound of the effect if there was no countervailing action of the government?
What we will so I don't think we can quantify or put an upper bound. What I will show you is that is the impact on riots of pro-protest and anti-protest content. Okay. And so we can look at both separately. Yes?
And so you mentioned 2 actors, like the bottom, like the people, the bottom, and the government, but are you also considering foreign governments' action to feed other countries' protests?
Okay, so in our case, well, you never know, but in our case, I think it was not an issue. Which does not mean that it could not happen elsewhere. If you follow the news, there are countries that interfere with other countries' elections. So I'm not saying that this is not a valid point, but in our case, you will see. When I introduce the wave of riots that we study, my gut feeling is that you can never rule it out, but typically there was no evidence and not even a discussion in the press about foreign interference. But it's a valid point. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, just a point. So, because you say it's such a consensus, but all those 3 papers rely indeed on the expansion of the social media. So, kind priced, and now the impact would be much lower. So I don't know if there is some evidence
So-
like this.
So the paper by Manacorda in Africa and Manacorda and Tesei, and the paper by Nikolov and co-authors on Russia use the spread. The paper by Chin tracks networks on an existing social media. So the question is a bit different. But it may very well be the case that things have changed over time and that the relation may change, which is an additional argument in favor of looking at the content, especially as I'm going to emphasize that, the nature of the content that you can share on social media has changed over time. And actually, that's what we are saying here. So one of the things you want to take into account when you are looking at social media is that it's not only the spread of social media that matters, but also what you share, and what you can share has changed over time. So with 2G, with second generation internet and network, you would essentially exchange messages. And then with 3G, you could move to pictures and videos. So it's something we want to have a look at. Images and videos are critical to, are differently emphasized by different social media. If you look at Instagram, pictures are central, pictures and videos, and likewise on TikTok. It's not so much the case on Twitter, or X, for that matter. And that's why we are going to look specifically at Instagram in our paper, because in our case, we think that it was an important media. Okay, images. With images and videos, you don't argue much, but you elicit emotions. You prime emotions, and that's why also when you look at the impact of social media on the propensity to participate in a protest or to host a protest, emotions become a central feature. If I show you a picture of a policeman hitting someone, it's not an argument, it's just something that elicits emotions, and that's what we are going to look at. So, I dropped the pointer. So that's what I'm saying, and that's what we are going to do, fortunately. So the case. So you may remember the Naël riots in France in late June, early July 2023. So they took place from the 27th of June to the 4th of July. And the event that caused those riots were the death of a teenager. He was 17 years old, and he was called Naël Merzouk. The thing is that he was driving a car that he had borrowed. The police asked him to stop. He stopped, and something happened. He was shot at point blank. The thing is that his friend at on the back seat and the driver behind the car filmed what happened. And initially, the official report of the police was that Naël Merzouk had tried to run away with the car, and that the police officer had used his weapon in self-defense. A few hours later, the two videos, the one from the guy sitting at the back seat and the one from the driver in the car following the car that Naël Merzouk was driving, were posted on the internet, went viral. And when you look at the videos, which I haven't, but that's what there is a consensus, there's absolutely no doubt that the car was not running away. It was obeying orders, and that for some reason, the police officer shot Naël Merzouk without any need to do so. That happened in Nanterre, and in the days that followed, riots erupted in the outskirts of Paris, and after a few days, they spread over to the rest of mainland France. Even, I think, there was one or two in Guadeloupe and Martinique. But so there were riots in at least in 537 municipalities, including municipalities that had never, ever hosted such a riot. So typically, we think of those riots as things that are typical of disadvantaged suburbs, banlieues, in larger municipalities, and smaller municipalities were affected. So that came as a shock, but also as a surprise that those riots affected so small municipalities, or municipalities that were so small. Okay. Besides the fact that the event is interesting per se, the reason to look at it is that it has several features that make it interesting. The first feature is that we have a well-identified trigger event, the death of Naël Merzouk in Nanterre. The second thing is that the wave of riot lasted about a bit more than a week. And we can track it over time from the first day to the last day, which means that we have what Cantoni and his co-authors refer to as a whole sustained protest. So it starts, it spreads over mainland France, and at some point it stops. Okay, and we can see, so we know day by day where there was a riot, when, etc. So we can use a panel structure, and from the beginning to the end of the wave of protest. And also for our purpose, if you remember the news from 2 years ago, the role of social media was immediately emphasized. And there was a report by a commission from the French Senate that also emphasized the role of social media in spreading the Naël riots, written by this gentleman called Buffet. Okay. Another thing that may speak to audiences that are not specifically French is that what happened to Naël Merzouk may be reminiscent of other such events. And if you think of the Black Lives Matter movement, you may remember that it started with the murder of George Floyd. So it was someone who was killed by a police officer. There was an official report that was later contradicted by a video, and the Black Lives Matter movement became viral. It also involved a sense of discrimination. It's probably not. It's probably meaningful that Naël Merzouk was through his father of Algerian descent. Likewise, George Floyd was black, and it only ended up with violent protests. So there are other events similar to what we experienced in France last year. So it means that hopefully we can inform readers from other countries on what may happen outside of France, which is a nice country, by the way. But we can't spend our time navel gazing. Okay. So in our study, we are going to observe each riot day by day. So we know in which day there was a riot in which municipality. Okay. So that's the dependent variable. Annalie and Paul scraped the activity on Instagram of a sample of, for the time being, I'm remaining vague, of influential users unrelated to the issue of the day, so that had nothing to do before the event with the riots. I will tell you what kind of influential users we used to seed the network. So we identify their networks, the people who follow those influential users, the people who follow the people who follow the users, and so on. And we get a network. So we seed a network using a well-defined group of users, and we try to get something broader. And the idea is that we are going to use the connections between those people within that network before the onset of the riots to identify connections between municipalities before the onset of the riots, to get a sense of the connections along which the riots might have spread. Yes?
So you have the date in which the connections were formed?
No, we don't. No. So, but we know that.
Kind of endogenous to what you post.
No, so we stop the. So you will see. We are going to. We can. You will see that we can reasonably argue that if you followed those influential users, it's not because you were interested in discrimination of teenagers of Algerian descent in French suburbs. You will see that the network has nothing to do with that. But the network existed when Naël Merzouk was killed by the police, and then it could be used by people to spread information about what was going on. Yes?
What was your reason for choosing Instagram rather than TikTok?
We'll come back to that. First of all, we had access to the data, let's be honest about it. But also, yes. But second, also, we think, and there are good reasons to believe that it was that it still is social media that speaks to people in the age bracket of the people who participated in the riots. We are in the process of gathering TikTok data, by the way. But it's less open than Instagram was when we started the project. So we are really in the process of writing documents to have access to TikTok. So our aim is to complement our results with Instagram, on Instagram with results on TikTok. Okay. You see, to some extent answers your question, yes.
Just a clarification question. So here you have in mind the use of social media as a way to spread the concern, but not as a way to organize riots, right?
You will see both. We will try to look to spot in the content shared on Instagram evidence of tactical information, or so what you have in mind, I presume, when you refer to organizing the protest, and more emotional stuff. And we want to tease out both. Okay, so this answers your question. So it's image-based, which is important because it's a new step in that kind of literature, but also it's popular in the age group. So there were people as young. So in the report by the Senate, they mentioned the case of a boy who was 12 years old and was arrested in one of the riots, and most of the people were in their teens up to mid-20s. So typically the age group that could be interested in Instagram. Because Instagram is based on images and videos, it's more likely to trigger emotions, and this is what we want to look at. And we are able to download, to scrape not only text data but also images and videos. So we have not used videos yet, but we have used images. Okay. In a nutshell, this is the kind of thing that we are going to observe. We are going to observe that when a municipality is exposed to the riot through Instagram, it's more likely to host a riot on the next day. So people in Marseille are connected to a city or cities where there are riots on the next day. So there are riots in the municipalities to which Marseille is connected on a given day. On the next day, the probability to observe a riot in Marseille is going to be higher. There is a one-day delay between being exposed to riots and hosting a riot. This answers your question. So we will observe. We will try to use keywords to identify when people are calling to action explicitly, sharing tactical information, and this works. Being exposed to that kind of information increases the probability to host a riot. Yes, Abner?
I was just wondering whether you could measure as well the intensity of exposure. It's like
you'll see it's both. It's both margins. When I show you what we estimate, it will be both. So the strength of the connection between our municipalities will measure the intensity of the exposure, and this strength is activated if there is a riot in your municipality. Whoops. Okay, we will see that emotions play a role. So posts that elicit fear, so we could code the fear content of posts. When you are exposed to content with fear that elicits fear, the probability to host a riot goes down. But if you are exposed to riots that elicit other types of emotions, in particular anger, you are more likely your municipality is more likely to host a riot. And on top of that, images seem to be efficient at conveying emotions and information. Okay. Now a bit of theory. So you may want to know, so in a sense it's a bit intuitive, but it's better to make it explicit. Why on earth would social media affect the propensity or probability to host a protest? And the fundamental reason for that is that before you can start a project, you need to solve a coordination problem. You don't want to be alone against the police for two reasons. First, it's going to be unsuccessful, and second, you are certain to be arrested. Okay? So if you want to start a riot, you need to be able to coordinate and to know that against the police or against on the street, there will be enough people, because it will increase the probability of success of being influential, but also it will decrease the risk of being arrested. And likewise, the government can use the social media to increase the cost of participating, or to increase the perceived cost of participating in the protest. So you can view organizing a protest as a tug of war between mobilization, people who want to get something done and need to coordinate to be as many as possible to take to the street, and the authorities that pull in the other direction. They want to deter people from organizing and from taking to the street. So we first we can have a look at the rational benefits of using social media. And so the first thing is that social media are a way to mediatize the cause for which you are going to take to the street. So in our case, you are going to start sharing information about what happened to Nahel Merzouk. It's outrageous. We need to do something about it. You learn the information that something has happened and that a protest is taking place. Social media facilitate explicit or tacit mobilization. In a sense, explicitly we can share information. Let's all meet up on Canebière at 8 o'clock p.m. On tomorrow. Okay, that's explicit. But also, if you see many people on your social network who start complaining about or sharing content about Nahel, you know that you're not alone. And that could be a form of implicit coordination. So you know that you're not alone, and that the next thing is just to know where to go and when. Okay? So it solves the coordination problem. At least it contributes to solving the coordination problem, and you could also share more tactical information. So be careful. There's a police team on this street. We should go and protest and move away from that street unless we are going to be arrested. So that's pretty rational. There are rational costs that are affected by the social media. The government or the authorities can use the social media to say, be careful, there will be police and we will strike down on any protest. We inform you that there will be a unit of CRS who will be on Canebière tomorrow, so do not even bother go to Canebière. Okay? On the other hand, social media can be a way to mitigate the cost of participating if precisely you share the information about the police. So someone has spotted CRS somewhere in Marseille, and they say, so let's not go to that part of the city, but let's go elsewhere. Now, there are also emotional benefits and costs. You could argue that emotions increase what we can refer to as the consumption utility of protest. You may not always protest to get something done, but just protest because protesting will give you intrinsic utility. You're angry, you've seen someone being killed by the police, you want to do something, and you do something because it brings you utility. It's the key assumption of the paper by Passarelli and Tabellini in Restud in 2017. There's a kind of a consumption utility of protesting. And so if I show you pictures that elicit anger, for instance, you're going, or some of you may want to do something about it. So it increases the benefit of protesting. And that's typically what you do. And that's also what you do within communities. So we are going to build a community. So it's referred to as emotional communities in the literature by sharing emotions. So we are all going to be a group who are outraged and angry by what happened to Naël Merzouk. And we feel that we are part of a group. It also, to some extent, contributes to solving the coordination problem. But here, we get something, an extra utility, because we know that we are part of a group. And it's a kind of story that we heard about the Gilets jaunes all the time. A lot of people enjoyed the simple fact of being surrounded by other people with similar views. So love of the group, but also hatred of the others. It may also be a way to share hatred of the police. We share emotions and we hate the police, so we are going to go and have a good old fight with the police. And it's also a way to get consumption utility from rioting. And there's anecdotal evidence, but also evidence from sociologists that part of the fact the motivation of protesting is just to enjoy the protest itself. Okay. Now, emotional costs. If you are a shrouded government, you are going to instill fear. You want the police. You want to deter people from participating in protest, so you are going to scare them away. So in a country like France, well, you just show members of the police force, or you send a message. In other countries, it could be more blunt, or you share images of police officers doing their job in a violent way. It may also be a way to elicit fear, and fear has been found to reduce, to paralyze or panic. There's a nice literature in psychology, but now economists are like Yann Algan and Stéphanie Stankeva are starting to have a look at that. Okay. And finally, why are we going to pay attention to images in particular? Because as I said before, images are efficient at conveying emotions. Telling you that someone who was killed will probably generate less emotions or weaker emotions than if I show you a picture of someone who was killed. Yep.
Sorry, I'm anticipating a bit, but are you only dealing with images or also with videos?
Only images for the time being.
And are you not afraid that there could be different selections in terms of sharing emotion through images or videos?
So we are going to be able to code the emotion on those pictures. So what you're saying, you may also mean that
like if videos are more to convey emotions than pictures.
I can't rule it out. Now, what we are going to look at is what happens when you are exposed to more pictures, more emotional pictures. Because we are going to be able to code the emotions of the pictures. So it may be that videos do the same or do it better, but it would not affect our estimates unless there is a correlation between pictures and videos. So I've got to think about it. But no, we haven't processed videos yet. Okay. Yeah. Also, pictures can be accompanied with text and draw attention to text. So it's a whole process. Okay. Now on with the data. So the data that we got were downloaded from the ACLED dataset. It's a global dataset on protests in the world, and they had a very nice coverage of the riots with Naël. We started with data that we got from Le Monde initially, and we obtained similar results. But ACLED is a bit more exhaustive. Okay, so from the 27th of June to July the 3rd, and you see the spread of riots. So it's pretty much everywhere. It started in Paris and then spread, and you've got overseas territories, but or departments with which we will not include in our setup. So it's mainland France, and you see that there were riots a bit everywhere. Okay, now we need data on Instagram. So we scraped in Instagram with two hashtags, Naël, that's the correct spelling, and Naël without H, which is an incorrect spelling, but it was also used as a hashtag. We work at the level of municipalities, not individuals, because we don't know if a user participated in a riot. We've got no way to know. So we needed to geolocate users. So to do that, we could use the information on their profile. So sometimes their city of residence appears. When there was no such information, we used the type of things they had posted before. So if you keep on posting comments or information about Marseille, we are going to assume that you are from Marseille. Okay, and using GPT for T-Mini or for O-Mini, we could systematically annotate the things that were posted. So gauge how emotional they were, the kind of emotion. We could also ask the AI to tell us what's on the pictures that we scraped. Okay, so now we need the network, and that's where. So we needed a network that was a priori unrelated to the case of the death of Naël Merzouk and the riots. So yes.
Sorry, before you reply to that, I was wondering about how you measure different emotions and how you classify them, and since that this is work that GPT is doing.
Yeah, it's done by GPT.
But I was wondering to which extent you could maybe show images, because
I will. I promise I will.
All right.
Yeah. I've got a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to show images. So just be patient. I will show you images. Yes?
Do you handle text that may be contained in the
Yes,
images as well?
both. We start with text, and then the most recent results are with images. But we started with text. Yes?
Have you validated the GPT classification with humans?
Not yet. So I trust Annalie and Paul on this. They told me that it made sense when they looked themselves.
They validated.
Yeah, at least. So they've got anecdotal evidence that it made sense. Yes?
So you said you geolocalize the authors of the posts and the comments, but not the authors of the comments?
No, also. So the point is that for each, so we want to measure the strength of connections between two municipalities. So I will give you more detail on this. So we need to know that someone in Lyon posted something that was commented by someone in Bordeaux. Okay? So we need the location of both. Okay? And then we will count the number of comments from people in Lyon by people in Bordeaux, and this will be the measure of the strength of connections between the two municipalities. Yeah, Romain?
So a couple of points. Number one is on geolocation. So this is really about soccer, right? And so if I post about like Paris every day because I'm like a
There would be a chance, but now I'm considering that we are in Marseille, that can't happen. More seriously, it's a risk. We need to assume that we can. So, of course, if someone in Arras has a strange kind of focus on Strasbourg and keeps on posting on Strasbourg, we are going to mistakenly assume that the person in question is from Strasbourg. It's an assumption that we need to make. We only need to make it when the person in question does not reveal her or his location in the short bio of the profile. Yes?
So by construction, you only have male influencers?
We probably have more male users than female users. That's a good point. Having said that, the vast majority of people who participated in riots were male. But we have not identified their gender. Maybe we've got that information.
But I mean, if I understand, you start with men.
With
The men's.
Level 0.
yeah, so level 0 is okay. So I haven't discussed it yet. So okay. So you are reading the slide. So we need to see the network, and we wanted the network to have several properties. The first property was that we wanted it to be as unrelated to Nahel as possible initially. The second is that we wanted it to be relevant. That is, that it would speak to people who could participate in the riots. And that's how we came up with the idea of using the male football team, because the male national football team at the time, so we have 49 players. Those people have Instagram accounts. They are followed by a lot of people who are not necessarily fond of taking to the street or demonstrating. They are visible, and we can assume that if you're a young guy, a young man or boy in your teens or early 20s, you will be interested in football. Or there's a high probability that you will be interested in football. So it's also relevant in the age group in which we are interested. Wait, Romain, we can come back to that.
Another question on sort of network exogeneity. So I find that the links from like level 0 commenters to the seed are exogenous, but the further down the line you go, the less the exogeneity assumption is credible.
That is.
At least in a world in which, of course, you know, the ties you get are not timestamped.
Yeah, I agree. Does it matter? I'm not sure. I will come back to that. We do something with the exogeneity of the network right from the baseline specification. But what we should bear in mind is that people who connected because they were following some player of the national team connected at least initially because they were following football players, not because they were commenting Nahel. And anyway, if they connected because of Nahel, it's out of it's out of our sample because we stop the network before the onset of the riots, before the death of Nahel. Okay? So this is going to be fixed over time. Okay? So it's not going to be driven by Nahel. It's not because so we both follow Mbappé. I see you post something on Nahel, and I like what you say, and then we are connected, and no, that can't happen because we, in our sample, stop the data collection on connections before Nahel Merzouk was killed. All right?
All right, I guess the key part here is that the links come from comments, not from the following action that you have on Instagram.
Yeah. So.
The comments themselves are timestamped.
The comments. So you will see. Just save that comment. There was a question. Okay. So maybe I should move on. How am I doing? I've got half an hour. That should work. So So we see the network. We look at members of the national football team. We identify their followers, the followers of the followers, the followers of the followers of the followers, and the followers of the followers of the followers of the followers. Okay, 3 levels. Okay, that allows us to define the exposure of municipality J to municipality I, and it's the number of comments over our period of observation of the network, so before the death of Naël Merzouk, of the number of comments of users located in J on posts authored by users in I. Okay, this is not this is unsymmetric. So imagine people. Let's say Lyon again, and a small village, small town. Let's say my hometown of Sarrebourg in Moselle. The 3rd largest city in France and a small city. There will be more comments in one direction than in the other, which is what we take that into account. Which means that more likely people in Sarrebourg will be more exposed to comments in Lyon than people in Lyon will be exposed to people in to comments in Sarrebourg or from Sarrebourg.
And the 49 players are attributed to Paris?
No, they are just players. They are just seeds. And fortunately enough, they don't all play in Paris. And some of them are abroad also, or even OM, Olympique de Marseille, so everywhere. Okay, so our assumption is that if we stop the network, the data collection of the network before the death of Naël, it's going to be exogenous to the riots. But it could correlate with offline connections, or possibly connections on other social media. So we are connected because we met in some event offline, or because we follow each other on Facebook, and then we start following each other on Instagram. So what we did is that as a measure of connections between 2 municipalities, we are going to take the residuals of a regression where we regress the strength of connections between 2 municipalities and a sort of gravity model. So we regress the raw strength of connections on the population sizes of the 2 municipalities and the geographic distance between the 2 municipalities, and we use the residual of that as our measure of connections between two municipalities. Okay, so we try to get rid of the of some form of municipality fixed effects, if you want, and distance fixed effects. Unless I can show you the specification, but maybe for the sake of time, I should move on. If you want to see results, is it okay? Good. Voilà. So now, if we've got that, this is what we are going to estimate. And this is going to answer a question that I think Romain asked earlier about whether we take into account the intensity of exposure. So the dependent variable is whether we have a protest on a given day in a given municipality. So on the 1st of July, was there a protest in Bourges? Okay, I'm making this up. This is a dependent variable, so it's a dummy variable. The explanatory variable will, so the variable of interest will be this. What is it? So it's the product of the intensity of connections between 2 municipalities. Okay, remember we measured the network before the onset of the riots. We removed what could be explained by distance and size, and we used that as an exogenous strength of connections. This is time constant. This is over the period of study. This is going to remain constant. So Bourges is connected to Grenoble. We have and Grenoble is connected to Bourges. And we measure the strength of that connection. We are going to now define the exposure of Bourges to to protest by multiplying the strength of connections between Bourges and other municipalities, and a dummy variable that takes the value 1 if there was, on that day, a protest in the other municipality. And we sum it for all the municipalities to which Bourges is connected. Okay, so that's what we do here. So we have protests on the previous day, okay, in another municipality. So we've got that for municipality I and J, okay? There's a protest in J. Municipality I is going to be exposed to protest in J. And the intensity of the exposure will depend on the strength of connections between the two municipalities. If there is a protest in a municipality with which my municipality is not connected, my municipality will not be exposed to the protests of that municipality. Conversely, if we are used to commenting each other's posts a lot, then the strength of the connection is high, large, and it will be activated when there is a riot in the municipality that I follow. Okay, so it's I'll take your comment. So it's a product of prior connections activated when there are riots in other municipalities, and riots in other municipalities change over time. So we have a prior network that is activated by riots that take place between the 27th of June and the 4th or 3rd of July. Yes?
Okay, so just for the connection variable, you are using the number of connection in your exogenous network that you then regress and try to residual?
Yeah. So it's a prior network, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we...
So it's really, but I just wanted really
it's a residual that we use.
the variable you use that you regress. And
The number of comments on posts from one municipality by another municipality during the 3 months during which we collected data.
Okay, so you took.
Okay? And so we also control for cumulative protest. We can include fixed effects of various kinds. Fixed municipality effects, fixed day effects, and a residual. And we are interested in this. All right. So I'm going to show you one table of results, and then my presentation will become. Yeah. Sorry. Up.
Just a quick question. So here, do you need to make the assumption that if I live in municipality I, I'm protesting in municipality I, and I'm not going elsewhere to protest?
Yeah.
And can you account for these spillovers? For example, I protest in municipality A, and then I'm very connected to municipality J. So the next day, I'm going to protest myself to municipality J, regardless of the people living there.
So we can't rule it out. And remember that we do not observe the protest activity of users. So that's why we are constrained to work at the level of municipalities. However, according to the press and the accounts, people did not move across municipalities. It might have happened. You may find one guy who moved, but overall they were very localized and people did not change. So there were no rioters who were traveling across municipalities, as far as we can gauge from the reports and the press. But you may have in mind the paper by Toki Haidt and Raphael Frank on the swing riots in the UK, in England in the early 19th century, and it's something that they use. In our case, apparently it was not major. Remember, there were young kids; they didn't have much money, so probably they couldn't afford to switch municipality. Yes.
There's something that I think might be funny here. Like you have you're looking at direct effect of exposure. So if you're directly exposed through your direct connection to a city, then if something happens the day before in the city, it may have an influence the next day. So if you want to know whether there are some links, deferred links, you will have the protest through times 2 periods in difference. But
here, I think there might be a connection also with the adjacency matrix in the network, and you could compare also what happens if you are looking at degree 2 connections between two cities, not changing the d-1, but contrasting those two estimations.
So you are referring to geographic adjacency here.
Not geographic. Like the connections you mentioned, you said you might not be connected to a city, but you might be connected through a second order connection. And that might be another specification that could be tested to contrast with the time.
Yep. Okay, I see what you mean. I will make a mental note and discuss it. We have not tried this yet. Yep. If it's okay, thanks for the comment. And now the outcome. So by and large, what we observe is that being exposed to protests from the previous day in the network of a municipality increases the probability of hosting a protest or a riot in that municipality on day D. So the interpretation is that people in my municipality have been exposed to protests on Instagram, protests from the next day, and that prompts them to stage a riot. And the more they are exposed, the more likely they are to go out and protest. So whatever that means, a 1 unit increase in exposure as we measure it, remember the product of the dummy variables by the strength of connections, increases the probability of hosting a protest by 6%. So it's not nothing, it's not super large, but it's in my view, it's reasonable. We tried to measure the length, the duration of the effect, and what you observe is that it's really d-1, so the previous day that matters. And once you take into account the impact of the previous day, you find no impact for 2 days before, from 2 days before or 3 days before, which is in line with the paper by Xin on China. So the effect of social media in our case is in keeping with what has already been observed elsewhere, which is in a sense reassuring. Okay. Robustness checks, and unsurprisingly they work. Otherwise I would not display them. So I told you that, but we are they are all displayed. So protests measured by Le Monde instead of ACLED. I told you that was our starting point until we came across the ACLED data and found out that it was exhaustive on France. Some of the players like Mbappé posted explicitly about the death of Merzuki. He said something about Petit Ange or something like that. And so there were 4 of them. Sorry, I don't know much about football, so apart from Mbappé, I don't remember who the others were. They are in a footnote. And we get the same result when we get rid of them. We exclude Paris, Nanterre, and both municipalities. Nothing changes.
And did you try to exclude top big cities like Lyon, Marseille, Paris, and everything at the same time?
For the time being, only Paris and Nanterre.
Okay, because what I have in mind is you have measurement error in the geolocalization of the users. So I guess people located in big cities are overrepresented. So I don't know how it can affect your result, but would be convincing to look at the result when you exclude big cities.
So, big cities. Okay. A good point. And thanks. I also wrote down the comment on the level 2 connections. At some point, we were concerned about unobserved heterogeneity, so we pushed it a bit further. We did something that is not completely econometrically advisable, but we considered pairs of municipalities. And so instead of using municipalities as our unit of observation, we considered pairs, which allows us to consider many more observations and to include pair fixed effects. So our dependent variable became, is there a riot or a protest in this pair of municipalities, controlling for pair fixed effects. And again, we found effects of the of exposure. Yeah.
Sorry, it's a clarification question. How did you define the pairs? How, by connections, that is those that were the most...
No, so Lyon and Bourges would be one pair. Bourges and Chartres would be another pair.
Okay, whatever, even if there were no connection, you were...
Yeah, and then we measure the strength of connections. Okay, so what we want to estimate remains the same, but we work at the level of pairs, and we and the dependent variable becomes, is there a riot in a given pair? Yeah, right, sure. Yeah, that's the idea. So we get more observations. We control for pair fixed effects, and still we get the same kind of results. We include municipality linear trends. I like the placebo. We estimated the same specification as the baseline, but instead of considering riots from the day before, we considered riots from the following day, and here the relationship is flat, which I find that's a robustness check or a sanity check that I find quite reassuring. And also at some point, it's more than a robustness check, it's more an extension. We replaced the dummy variable, the dependent variable, by the number of comments on Nahel. And what we observe is that when there is a riot in a municipality, people in that municipality start, when a municipality is exposed to content on Nahel, there is more comments originating from that municipality. So we start seeing a form of channel of transmission. People are exposed to content about riots. They start sharing information, posting themselves comments on the riots, and the following day, bam, they go offline, they take to the street, and they start a riot. Okay, so now let's have a look at the content to get a sense of what is at work. So we looked initially at the textual content of the messages posted on Instagram. So we looked for call for action. So let's do something, let's go and riot, something like that. Specific call to action. So let's go on Canebière at 8 p.m. tomorrow, or the absence of any call to action. And what we observe is that when you are exposed, when a municipality is exposed to that kind of content, and we still use the same idea that it's through Instagram that you're exposed to that, it increases the number of comments, regardless of the type of call for action, but we find that the effect of having a riot is larger when you have, it's intuitive, when you have more comments calling to action. Okay, so you see a lot of comments in your municipality saying we need to do something, and then you are going to do something. Okay, now, yes?
Just to understand, so it's the comments from your municipality that call for action that then generate a higher probability for a demonstration, for some sort of riot, or
from the other municipalities. From the other municipalities through your network.
Okay. And you account for the fact that in the city itself you have those comments?
It's a channel of transmission. We see that the number of comments in the municipality increases.
And did you measure whether there was a moderating effect by authorities? I mean, you can control if in some municipalities authorities say something.
That's what we call, so not the authorities, but we refer to anti-mobilization content. So people showing content with repression, criticizing the violence of the repression, that kind of things. And this has the opposite effect. Yeah? So actually, it increases the number of comments, but decreases the probability of a protest. That's exactly this slide. So if you are exposed to content showing repression, you are, or if a municipality is exposed, yeah. now the slant of comments. So I don't remember who asked if we did something with images. So we asked GPT to classify and annotate the post, including images. Huh? So, and I'm giving you examples. So, Romain, those are the examples you were looking for. So, this is labeled as pro-protest. So you see people protesting. Actually, it's a picture of Naël Merzouk's mother. So it's definitely something in support of the protest. And if you read at the text that came with the comment, it tells us that Mounia Merzouk organizes a white protest in memory of her son, who had been killed age 17 by a bullet in the chest. And several thousand people gather and march in the streets. So, by all accounts, it's a pro-protest post. And here you've got the opposite. Aucune violence ne peut être justifiée. Hein? And you've got pictures of a burned house, of burned houses, and you can't justify violence against elected officials or police officers and so on. Huh? So pro-protest, anti-protest. Pro-police, so let me translate. Under the uniform, you've got men and women who are protecting you. Thanks a lot. Respect. So I guess that you will all agree that it's a pro-police post. And vice versa, conversely, the police mutilates or maims. ACAB, all cops are bastards. I guess that you will all agree also that this is an anti-police post. So what do we get? If you are exposed through an Instagram to pro-riot, pro-Naël riots comments, it increases the number of comments on Naël. It also increases the probability of hosting a riot. And when you are exposed to the other kind of comments, so comments that are either neutral or taking the side of the police, it has the symmetric effect. Fewer comments on Naël and a lower probability to host a protest. Up. If you are exposed to pro-police comments, it decreases the number of comments on Naël posts. It decreases the probability of hosting a riot. So, and surprisingly, we don't observe the opposite effect for posts that are not labeled as pro-police. Yes?
So here, the assumption is that the exposure to either pro-riots or pro-police comments are exogenous to
we use the same kind of strategy. So the strength of the network is constant over time, and you are going to be exposed to that kind of comments through your network. Sorry. Okay. So you've got the interaction of something that is constant over time, the strength of the network that we interact. So it's the kind of typically we get an instrument with something that varies over time.
But again, I mean, if we think of other events like protest in favor of justice for Adama Traoré, blah blah blah, this network was formed before, and so they were formed at the time right before Naël was shot, and so this network might have an influence on the reaction of these people after Naël, right? Or maybe
no, we can't rule it out. But remember that we seeded our network on something that was unrelated to Adama Traoré, for instance. Your comment would be very embarrassing for us if we had seeded our network on the network of people who were in some way interested in what happened to Adama Traoré. We seeded the network on people who are interested in the national football team. All right? There was a question here, and then in 5 minutes, I'm almost done. Good.
I have a follow-up question. So Emmanuel Macron said that sport isn't politics, but I'm not sure it's always the case. And actually, so you
neither am I. Neither am I.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you excluded the 4 players that actually posted on Naël, but could you check whether this exogenity of the network works by looking at their posts in the years that precede this episode? Because I'm thinking about Lilian Thuram, for instance, whose son is actually in the French national team, and who is always posting on or defending the cause of anti-racism, and possibly that you have some of the players here that are actually really active on that cause, and that correlates with those protests.
Wait. I think at some point we've done we compared the networks when we excluded those 4 players and the network that we had otherwise, and they looked very much similar. But football activity, political activity before we need to do that. All right. Yeah. But then we have to move on, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah, it was really related to what he said. I think that there might be some self-selection into which football player I follow, depending on like the race or the social background. And he's from poor background, so I identify more closely with that person, and I might have a political ideology that is already seeded into pro-riots against.
We can't completely rule it out. In a sense, does it matter that? So we can't rule it out. Huh? So first reaction. Second, does it matter? In a sense, there is a pre-existing network, and it's activated when the network conveys information on the riot. Huh? So remember that we have the 2 dimensions: the cross municipality dimension, or the cross pair of municipality dimension, the strength of connections, which is constant over time, and the riots and the comments that are activated day by day, which creates the day municipality variation that we exploit. So we may be connected for any reason. What matters is that on one day, through the network, through our connection, I observe a comment or I get information on riots in your municipality. Okay? Just, I don't want to be rude, but so visual prominence is the final one before last slide. So on Instagram, sometimes the image is the main focus. Here, so it's again a picture of the march organized by Naïl Merzouk's mother, and you've got no text. That's a picture. Here, the core of on this post, you've got a background image and some text. So here, we call it as background image, and sometimes you've got virtually no image. It's just text. So we code that, and we look at the impact of images. And so pro-Nahel comments using images as their focal point. So those that say something positive about the riots using images elicit fewer comments than pro-Nahel comments not focusing on images, so fewer comments than text, but they generate more riots. And this squares very nicely with the notion that images elicit emotions, so you're not going to comment. Anyway, there's a picture, what can you say? But you're angry, and you take to the street. Oops. And emotional, so we use the GPT to code overall emotionality and also measure 6 basic emotions: anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. And regardless of the type of emotion, the more emotional a message is, the more comments it generates. And what we like very much, it's a result that really makes sense. If you are exposed to messages with emotional content, if your municipality is exposed to emotional content, especially sadness, the probability that the municipality hosts a riot increases, with one exception, and it's an exception that I like very much: fear, and it's exactly what you would expect. Remember the kind of tension between mobilization on the one hand and repression on the other hand. So you get angry, that's or sad. It's on the side of mobilization. You get more consumption utility from the protest, or you find it's more important. It increases the probability of the protest. If you are scared by what you see, so you express fear, you're exposed to fear, you are going to reduce the probability of a riot. So this only summarizes what I've said. So basically what we learn is that we can provide evidence, I hope convincing or as convincing as possible, evidence that Instagram contributed to disseminating the Nile Merzouk riots. But the main message is that the effect of those posts, of those messages of Instagram depended on the content of the messages that were posted. And typically, coordination facilitates riots, repression deters riots, so we confirm that. Anti-Nahel and pro-police riots deter riots, pro-Nahel comments encourage riots, and sadness encourages riots, and fear discourages riots. And that's all I've got to say.